Thank you so much for joining. I noticed also one of our colleagues, Manon, is here, so I want to say a special hello to her. My name is Melodie Leung, and I've been an architect at Zaha Hadid Architects for the past 15 years. We've grown a lot actually in that kind of decade and a half. It's a practice that Zaha started about 40 years ago. And you're probably familiar with our portfolio of works, which spans from across a whole range of projects, from master plans to cultural complexes, to towers, to residential, and even into furniture and product design. I'm just thinking I'll start taking you through the introduction of our office. If I go here. Viviana's supposed to be doing this introduction, but she'll join us, she'll jump in as soon as she can. So Zaha was known for saying that there should be no end to experimentation, and I think this is something that we're going to be showing in the work that we will be presenting to you. We'll be presenting a range of work from across the world and across a number of different scales. This is a shot of our office. We're over 400 people from over 50 nationalities, based in 2 buildings in London. This is the original studio called Bowling Green Lane in Clerkenwell, and we also have our gallery, which is a 7-minute walk away. So I'm speaking to you right now from my home in London, but we're all of us are working from home, and we've managed to find the transition as a workable solution. And we're really fortunate that we've been very lucky this entire time. A quick snapshot of some of the specialty teams that we have in the practice. We have a team that specializes in looking at interiors, at product design, master planning, workplace analytics, so looking at the kind of flow of different densities of people and really trying to optimize where workstations can be located, how to keep in mind the range of a view. And then digital design and fabrication research is something that we always like to keep ongoing, so that we can allow that to inform our design process as well, so that everything that we're learning from working at the very early stages of building technologies also informs our projects at the stages of designing for construction. We also have a team.
Melodie, sorry, Viviana has just joined us.
Yes, can you hear me? Apologies, I had a little bit of a delay in connecting.
No problem, welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Hello.
Hello. Viviana, I just started on the introduction. Maybe you want to introduce yourself, and then you can finish the intro?
Of course. So good afternoon, everyone. I don't know if you are a student, professional, or just interested in knowing a bit about our company, how do we work, how do we operate. My name is Viviana Muscettola. I've been in the office since 2004. I'm a director now. I started when the practice was quite small. We were 40 people in a very small space, and now the office has grown, as you have seen, to 400 staff, and this architectural staff. And I'm very happy to be with you this afternoon. I work mostly in Southeast Asia. I wouldn't mind a job in Europe to start with, if not in the UK. But I've been living for 1 year in Beijing, and I got some contact over there, and very happy to be still working there. We will see how it goes there by the end of this bit uncertain 2020. So but please finish this slide, Melodie, and then I'll keep going.
So we also have a team that's looking at virtual reality. So we have including motion sensors, so that we're, in addition to using it for presentations, we're also looking at how to use that as an environment to design within. Sustainability is a large part of what our focus is at every stage of a project. The built environment contributes a lot to the carbon impact across industries, so that's a shared responsibility that we all have. And urban analytics as well. Cities continue to change, and we, across a number of different projects, are always focusing on how we can take this data collection and the kind of future forecasting and allow it to inform our master planning.
So in terms of what we specialize on, of course, we do master planning, as you have seen, and there are many that we are currently working, especially in Asia. But our main core of business is, of course, architecture, interior design, and product design. And this is a quick array of projects. They go from quite tall towers to public libraries to office buildings, and then interiors for small shops to a residential unit on top of a penthouse. All of the interiors was designed by us. To product design, you can see in Bulgaria a fantastic collection of shoes or tables. And during this presentation, see a very interesting array of projects that we are currently doing. Next, do I have command? No. And again, architecture is about collaboration, and internally to the office, we have, I mean, staff is not staff. You have your working group, and that includes everyone. We don't get to always decide the team that is going to be with us. And the collaboration is not only internally to your group of work, that could be quite big, like up to 150 staff, including ourselves, but it's also to collaborate with other specialists that are part of the company. We have a core team that is constantly working in parallel with us on ongoing jobs, but also doing their own research on forms, fabrication, and moreover, trying to set up new tools by scripting special tools that then can be used in some of the running projects or only as a pure research. It's like a top-end master course that is always running in parallel with the office. We have also a research center that again can span from virtual reality to experimenting with drawings, and this is still very much part of the way we work. And finally, what Melodie was mentioning before, the work placement strategy. In this moment, we are running the system on the office premises as well to check how are we doing now, when we will be able to reopen, and what would be the condition in terms of social distancing or better physical distancing that is needed maybe for another few months. So if we move on, the office has been recognized as an international practice of high caliber. Some of the awards that you see here are awards that were given to Zaha and were the first one for someone from Iraqi, and especially a female architect. And again, Zaha hated this term of female versus male architect. She was getting very disappointed when they were saying, oh, okay, you have been the first. And she was saying, I'm the first architect to win in this category from Iraq or from London, but please don't use the gender. That was something very important for her. But you see, it's a really important array that recognizes not only internally that the office has been, as a collaborative effort, has done very well, but it's also a way of your peers giving an important recognition to what the office has been doing and what will do, we hope, for a very long time. And this goes back to, press and, but also the array of clients. Of course, we do have a lot of wealthy and private clients, but we work with institutions all the time. In this picture, there are schools. For example, in the middle, there is a school in London, South London. We work with local authorities. We work with museum institutions, with the Olympic group. And this gives you the idea how versatile is the office also when it comes to design for a client that maybe is one person or is a huge group of participants, stakeholders that are part of the pool of our clients. And a bit of the work that we are doing right now, some of those projects I can see in these slides are already completed, others are in the pipeline. The most important thing is to know that the office is working in many countries, and this makes the richness of our expertise. When looking at all the nationality that our office has, the important thing to remember that there are fantastic ideas that come from a pool of people that in terms of education have a very different one, but when it comes to architecture, they could have very conflicting, and that's where it becomes to be interesting, the discussion, or very aligned ideas that develop through time. There isn't any one designer when you go and see all of those projects that are going in the loop now. There isn't any architect. The press likes to say that I did this and Melodie did something else. In reality, we all work as a group, not only internally, but with all the pool of engineers, experts, and fabricators around the globe. And it's very, for us, it's a real pleasure to be always confronted with different people, where the client comes with an idea, they want us to visualize, they never ask for something specific. They want us to give our view on a site, on a master plan, on a product design, and create something that, first of all, respond and puts in place a vision, but it's also something that has been built through a lot of work. Now you see, for example, one of the office well-known building in the world that is the Adelayev Center in Baku. And this was designed to be the piece of iconicity in the city center and all of the plaza that leads to it, of course. And at that point, the brief was very clear and was an extremely rich experience for the team that worked on this project, not only to look at what was happening on the outside, this very strong image of a white folding mountain, but it's also what happens in the inside, for example, the auditorium, that is all cladded, built in natural timber. And again, keep going, there are important things that we had to deliver not only in time, but in budget, also thinking about, you know, the life during the Olympics that you can see on the left side, and afterwards of what the swimming pool that now is open to all to the general public in London will look at the end of the Olympic Games. They don't last much, but they cost very, very much to governments. And this is a project in Korea. It's a center for arts in general, fashion as well. And it's the content of this building. I think that it's important, if you say just a second on that slide, the important thing about this project is that it was in an area that was completely left over from the urban center of Seoul. And the content of the building, they have no Mona Lisa or Michelangelo inside. They do shows, but has attracted, since it opened in March 2014, over 30 million of visitors. And it's a huge, huge number compared to, it was second, the year of the opening was second only to the Louvre again. So how project can, throughout the design, throughout the architecture, throughout the attention to the detail, really bring a new place where to be in a city. And right now we are really, it's a huge point for everyone. I mean, the office has always been interested in innovate through construction. And for many years, we have been dreaming about designing and then building a sports center all made in timber, with all of the problems that this can bring up when you think about all of the regulation about fire protection. This is a forest green eco stadium, and if you keep going, it's in a fantastic field, and it's all, the structure will all be in timber. And the way the exterior is waving is also representing what is happening again inside the stadium with the lower and higher part of the pitch, of the seating for the pitch. Yep. And this is what it will look is a natural ventilated space, and is all the foyer area before you enter into the stadium itself. And this, contemporary way of looking at constructing in timber will be, once built, an extremely powerful project to show how you can be inventive with whichever material you get to use. And there is a serious reason at looking at what is good for our environment in the construction industry. And we keep going. This project, for example, it's an office building built in Beijing. The interesting thing for you to know, it's a series of open eggs with courtyard. And we have implemented during this project a sophisticated system of BIM, and made possible to this building that looks extremely complicated from a point of construction to always use the same module of glazing. So all of the different elements, you can see it in the picture on the left, for example, all of those round shapes are effectively then subdivided and opdivided with only one single type of glazing. And then you concentrate the money on the money and also the difficulties in construction in the special piece, like the bridges that connect one egg to another, or one courtyard to another. The very interesting flow that is created then at multiple levels also brings the project to a very high end of communication between people. That was exactly what we wanted to do, but also the client was very looking forward for. And here we are, the special bridges. Now, when it comes to sustainability, I really like to present this project not only because it's been the first LEED Platinum. The LEED is one of the accreditation that you can have for sustainability. And you well know how Saudi Arabia, it's a country with an extreme weather condition. And most of the years outside is not possible to be because the temperature they get extremely intense. And this project has been designed with this in mind. So if you can keep scrolling, the shaping itself, it's an array of cells in which in the middle part there is an open corridor covered by a canopy. But the whole design started by this very simple, and if there are students here, they will be able to do it as well. It looked at what were the direction of the sun and which was the predominant wind in the area to try to capture on one end the wind coming into the single cells, and on the other making always the side of the building facing the sun higher and completely enclosed. So from this array, I leave it to Melodie to continue with the experimentation.
So now we're going to zoom out or zoom in a little bit and jump into a much smaller scale of projects. And what I'd like to do is take you through some of our portfolio of product and furniture designs and present it in a sense that it's seen as a continuous project of research and development within the design studio. This was an art installation that we created that was inspired by the project that Viviana just presented. The master plan is now exploding out from the corner of the gallery that we have in London. And it was the first installation that we had done in the space, and this space becomes a place where we can activate it with, in this instance, a hair salon. We can activate it with young designers featuring their work. We do exhibitions about our own work there as well. And a quick zoom back to the office in the very, very early days. And this is a plan painting on the wall, which is actually of one of the first interior projects from the office. And the idea of looking at an abstraction of a three-dimensional space as a tool with which we can design. Here's a photograph of Zaha sitting within the physical furniture designs after they've been realized. And already this concept that she was always exploring of a three-dimensional composition of parts always in harmony and always suspended in movement in a very particular proportion in relation to each other. So in those early days, there were also, there was a series of exploration in the presentation of the work. So here's one of the projects in Düsseldorf, which was a media center, one of the first large projects in the office, which unfortunately didn't get built in the end. But it shows the perspective of the project being explored from many different perspectives. So you can see approaching the building from the ground, rotating around from the left, looking at a very extreme perspective, looking up, and all of these compiled as a kind of capture of the design in three-dimensional form, but across time and across different perspectives. And in a similar manner, this view towards London, which was a very important place that situated her in her practice in London, which shows the increasing densification of the city, which is why it's the fiery red, and then this orange river, which represents the Thames, and the possible ways of expanding the city into these clusters, which are actually now quite evident with the developments that are currently happening. This is a photograph of the gallery from maybe about, 10 years ago. So with some of the furniture designs that we designed for Establish & Sons. And it's a really fun space that's always changing. We use it as a place to exhibit our work in an environment. So it's immersive and the designs are presented in relation to each other. Up until then, we had also been commissioned to design exhibitions of our products and furniture works. For example, here in Philadelphia, one of the earlier exhibitions of our collections of furniture. And what you saw previously from Viviana's slide, one of the designs that we've done for Bulgari, the V01, it's quite an iconic ring from them, and we revisited the design to try and bring the same amount of dynamism into the different bands, and also continuing that story in the way that it's presented. There's always an exploration and questioning how different materials can come together in the details. So this is a bracelet that we've designed for a Lebanese jewelry designer called the House of Muzanar. The diamonds then filling in the petals. And then this is an example of where the crystals are crushed and then compassed and suspended within the resin. And this is a bracelet that we designed for Swarovski. And this brief for designing smaller scale projects, while they still explore many of the same themes as the larger scale projects, the fit and the relationship to the body is always of utmost importance. This is a bracelet for George Jensen and a clutch for Perrin Politan, and a shoe and a clutch for Charlotte Olympia. We always like to try and explore a range of ideas, or one idea across a range of materials. So this was a really fun one to be able to look at a transparent clutch with this gold band that also echoes the structural part of the shoe. And then we also love collaborating with brands and with companies that have a whole expertise of their special materials or their special products. So this was a shoe that we designed for United Nude, and we started with their very tried and tested shape for the shoe. And we did many different design sketches, which we were able to realize digitally, study by 3D printing, and there were many series of prototypes up until the final shoe, which tries to mask the more recognizable shape, let's say, of the fit around the foot, but still expresses the dynamism as one walks, and is actually very comfortable. So this is a little bit flexible. And playing again with this idea of a composition of parts that create a greater whole. This was an early design for a tea and coffee set for Sawaya Moroni, which could be stacked and rearranged in a similar manner to these vases, which is for Alessi. So the same vase can be paired, it can be quadrupled, it can be created across an entire arrangement across a long table. And some of those collaborations with these other design companies turned into quite fruitful, long-standing relationships. For example, this is another piece for Alessi, a tea and coffee set, a centerpiece called the niche for a table, which can be reconfigured as well as this, which is the latest product with them, a cheese grater, which is ergonomic and fits well in the hand. It has this beautiful kind of pebble-like shape and also has a place to catch the cheese within it. We've been fortunate to be able to design products as varied as a set of cutlery for WMF that we were encouraged quite a few years ago to start building up our own collection. So the Zaha Hadid Design Homeware Collection is something that's been growing every year, where we source suppliers from across the world who are specialists in the materials in particular for each of the products. So this is a salt and pepper shaker called Duo. And again, it comes in different shades of colors, can be recombined. This is a candle holder, which can be stacked, which is related to a centerpiece table called the cell. And that same family also has these marble coasters. And it's a very playful, I think, approach as well, because these can each be collected and accumulated and mixed and matched into many arrays of different possibilities depending on the setting. So we've started to also take that collection into wholesale around the world. And at the same time, we've continued our collaborations, which are limited editions. This was a collaboration with a designer named Gareth Neal, looking at timber. And this is commissioned by Sitco, which is carved out of marble. I think there's some noise, so everyone can mute. As well as exploring this this is handcrafted from silver, as well as lighting, which fills an entire room, depending on the type of the transparency, the translucency of the glass. So both of these pieces are for Lasvit. And these projects are really great because all of these companies are the top level internationally at making their products. So marrying their expertise with our vision in trying to really push what the craftsman can do is always a fun challenge for everyone involved. This is a table called the Liquid Glacial. This is originally designed actually for glass, but in the end it's carved out of solid acrylic, and it's supposed to capture the movement of water as though it's suspended and hovering above the ground. And these kind of experimentations in design we apply across a whole range of materials. So again, a large table in marble on a wall. This is a table which is based off of an installation called Elastica, which was also developed into wallpaper, but always the idea that we try and really expand the depth of the two-dimensional surface, and including into a collection of rugs that we've done for Royal Thai. Down to the point where in some of our exhibition designs, so for instance, this is a gallery in Zurich called Gallery Mrzynska, where Zaha was able to curate an exhibition of work of hers, original work, in conversation with the Russian suprematists who really inspired her. So Malevich and Rodchenko and Elizitsky, their works were exhibited on the white canvas as though it was exploding through the black space of Zaha's works. And then also taking that exhibition into a two-dimensional to three-dimensional pop-up special edition catalog book. And then being able to, this is the same exact gallery, we were commissioned again then to create a backdrop, an immersive experience for Kurt Schwitter's work. And then zooming out back into the city square in Zurich. Sometimes this takes us into retail design. For instance, for Il Maquillage, this is in Soho in New York, looking in on this installation, which on the one scale reaches the city on the facade, but then on the smaller scale is also perfectly sized to display the products. Another instance for Neil Barrett, where we had a very kind of simple concrete box, but then designed a very sculptural piece in the middle, which was then again had different directions, different textures across it, and could be used for the display specifically of his menswear products. And then this is in London, a showroom of Roca bathroom products, taking the idea of fluid water carving out the space of the showroom, taking it into the lights on the ceiling and swooshing across the walls, and then contrasting that to the darker cavernous spaces, which are framing the views of the different collections. And then bringing it back to shoes, a store for Stuart Weitzman. Again, all of the different elements on the ceiling, the walls, the freestanding furniture to be all integrated as a part of a cohesive design language while still being scaled to perfectly exhibit the products in the best possible light from the best possible angles. And then moving into something that's much more immersive, this was an installation that we designed in a gallery in Manchester for the Manchester International Festival. Is basically a box. And we were commissioned to design a chamber music hall for performances of Bach music. And it's a tensile structure which then traveled. So we tried to really exaggerate the experience of being outside of it and then entering into it through the swirling ribbons, which also create some small surprising spaces that encompass visitors in whites, while creating the stage as well, which frames the performers. And then taking that installation, it traveled the next year to Amsterdam, where it was in a space that was 5 times larger for the Holland Festival, and then it traveled to Abu Dhabi for the Abu Dhabi Arts and Music Festival. Similarly, we were fortunate enough to be commissioned to create this pavilion for Chanel, which travels around the world starting in Hong Kong. And then this is the entrance. And it traveled through to Tokyo and New York. And it was supposed to come through London, but then that was when everything froze in 2008. The interior included 12 different commissions by artists. And so there was a variety of spaces. And this was a central atrium space where Yoko Ono had a wishing tree. And then also fitting out the interior to create the variety of atmospheres within the pavilion, using materials such as fabric, as well as the fiberglass panels. This is for the Science Museum based in London, which was inspired by the aerodynamics of an airplane, for the Maths Gallery. And we designed all of the pieces in here, starting with the airplane, which is their prized possession, and capturing the aerodynamics of its, how it flies, as well as studying how those forces would react within the rectangular gallery. And that provides the graphics for the floor and the placement for all of the exhibition panels. And then also using this to further our research into digital fabrication and new technologies. These are studies for the benches. The benches were carved with, from these molds with hot wire cutting and then cast with concrete. So with the hot wire cutting, we were able to create many more shapes and create the molds much more efficiently, so we could vary them to mimic the aerodynamic flows through the gallery. And working also with heritage projects in Hyde Park, Serpentine Museum, which was an old historic gunpowder storage building which used to be the edge of the city, and then creating a contemporary extension to it, which was also a tensile structure. So this is a structure with the tensile fabric being pulled, and the glass silicone glazed tensile fabric eventually being patterned and stretched taut to create the restaurant, which was animated with a number of uses all the time. And then some interior work with a hotel in Madrid. And some early studies of how we were looking at interiors as being completely continuous landscapes. There's also that study for a bathroom in Miami. Into more recent interiors that we've designed. This was for a high-end residential development in Australia. And looking at all the details across the mirrors to the integration of the furniture, and even the language of the spaces between rooms. These designs of the interiors also help to inform our product portfolio. So for instance, this kitchen is with Bofi, but originated as a part of one of our residential projects. And then I was going to take you through 3 projects, probably quite quickly, through from the concept design to some of the construction. This is a digital billboard in London on the M4 coming in from the airport. Some of you might have seen this near Earl's Court. And there were very specific angles. It was a very long and narrow site. There's an existing pagoda building, which is in red, and a very, very narrow and dark alleyway. So the building on the left was torn down, and we did a number of studies. So even though the entire sculptural billboard looks as though a kind of continuously curving shape, it actually embodies a lot of restrictions on the site between the amount of space that we had on the pavement as well as the viewing corridors from the street. And we looked at this from a number of different perspectives, from the operation and maintenance, so where the cherry picker would be able to go on the sidewalk and on the street. The screens would all be maintained from the interior. And the digital model for the project showing in blue all of the platforms. So on the top, the platforms also flip down so that they don't need to push a ladder through, but any of the operations team can also easily reach, with health and safety standards, any of the modules of the digital screen from behind. So with the screen removed, you can see a part of the interior before the screens are mounted, and then on the right, the kind of access that they have, which was all basically figuring it out as we went, because there's not really a precedent for this project. So there's a pneumatic door, which came from fabricators who build super yachts, and that's how they access it remotely. And then the fabrication was precisely formed from stainless steel. It's a monocoque structure, which means that the shape of the sculpture structures also the ribs, and they were cold formed. So the shape that we had frozen and sent in the 3D model was then formed by first robots and handcrafted by hand, actually, because working with stainless steel and giving it a very seamless finish at the end of the day comes down to a very fine craft. And there was only one guy in the whole team who was the one who was allowed to finish it in the end. So there was a lot of marking up and checking on the continuity of it to really create a product that seemed so seamless and effortless in the end. The construction sequence consisted of an existing basement, which is not visible, but actually was one of the more complicated parts of the project, in terms of the waterproofing, and then pouring the foundation into there. Then building up the CNC milled granite planters, and then assembling the stainless steel pieces in 8 parts overnight over a series of a month. And 1 lane of traffic was closed off on the major motorway for the duration of a year in order to erect the scaffolding around the structure and allow all of the works to be completed on the interior. It's an LED screen with an 8-pitch pixel resolution. And you can see here there's a gap to the frame, which is actually where the water is collected. And it was a lot of coordination between the different suppliers and the different parts in order to create something in the end that really has the harmonious composition between what happens in the public realm, which is opening up the sidewalk much more for the pedestrians, making it a much safer space, between the planters and the landscape design, as well as the landing of this stainless steel sculptural billboard, which is 30 meters wide, so the size of the building, but in essence, quite a unique product design. And then also 1000 Museum, which you've probably seen on the skyline in Miami. What's exceptional about this project is its exoskeleton. So it has a podium which holds 250 car parking spaces, and then about 80 penthouses above. You can see the top that there's full-story penthouses, and then a third of the way down, it turns into half-story penthouses. we wanted to show you how we design across a whole series of iterations. So we always test a number of different ideas, and even down to the fabrication. This was the first time that a building of that size had been constructed out of poured on-site concrete exoskeleton columns, where the panels were made out of UHPC, so ultra high performance concrete, and then they were assembled around the stainless steel reinforcements, and then the concrete you can see on the right is poured on site. Because this had never been done before, it had to go through a whole series of peer reviews to test and ensure that this was going to be safe, and they were able to perfect the technique as they moved up, so that by the time the building had reached the point where it needed to start this assembly process, construction process, it was then they had figured it out basically. And this was because it saved a lot of time on site, that the formwork stays, so it has already a nice finish when it arrives on site because it's been formed in the factory, and they only have to assemble and pour the concrete inner structure on site. And they can continue to build up while the rest of the building is completed. These are the pools above the parking lot. And then visualization of one of the views from the penthouses, and then some of the interiors which cap out the top of tower with the amenity spaces, including a pool and a members bar. And really, often the building is seen from the side of the Biscayne Bay, but then this is the side where it faces the park as well, and the way that it integrates into the existing pedestrian circulation. And this is the campus. And then finally, the station, which is opening this year in Riyadh. So again, Riyadh in Saudi is going through a lot of growth. And we won a competition in 2012 to design their main station in the financial district, and a number of the studies that we explored in the early days. But in the end, the lower right is the one that's maybe closer to the final one, which takes into account the solar gain and the intense heat that comes through. It was a very complicated project to coordinate. Every single train line was its own consortium. So there's 3 train lines and 1 monorail. Everything was coordinated in BIM. And some examples of how the different parts come together. It's double curved, but the double curvature allows for the tight sites to also integrate the escalators at very specific angles and locations. And if the facade had been single curved, it wouldn't have been as strong. So it's a really, the design of the shape and the overall massing of the project is also intrinsically linked to its performance, both structurally and internal circulation-wise. This is a visualization of the interior, so always trying to keep those open views and keeping it easy to navigate. And these are some of the recent construction photos of the interior and the exterior. So one can see in this view, Riyadh, let's say, of yesterday, and in this view, the Riyadh that's coming up today. So this project is really on the threshold of the past and the future. And I'm going to pass now to Viviana to talk about 2 more projects, more in depth. I think, Viviana, you're on mute.
Thank you very much, Melodie, for your presentation. I love the way you go from one scale to another when presenting how certain geometries and rules applies from, the pattern of the cheese grater from, let's say, to the facade of a building. And I want to reply to the first question that is already, they already saw on the, before I start on the 2 projects. I think it's more interesting to reply to the question. Someone was asking that we know that the office is working on a very prestigious project, meaning also very high budget, but what about public works? And I think this is a very pertinent question for you, and I want to try to reply to it in my best, really thinking it through. First of all, I would say that the office has a portfolio of maybe not social housing, but schools, students, accommodation, in different parts of the world. I'm currently working on student housing in Hong Kong with a very limited budget and therefore a less opportunity to experiment. Nevertheless, the project I hope will be as interesting in terms of master planning, in terms of the detailing of the facade and the interior spaces as some of those luxury condominiums. Now the question is really, and I think it's a very pertinent one, it's about the cost of construction and the budget that different architects can work with. And at every budget corresponds a different level also of possibilities when it comes to the construction industry. The second project that I will be presenting, it was an extremely expensive project. Nevertheless, we utilize all of the possible technology to minimize the cost. And of course, sometimes the overall budget of a client, it looks unlimited, but everyone has a limit. The second question is in regards to research and innovation. And you would never expect that to look at a parallel industry like doctors or research in we want to talk about virus or something else. That there is for sure a time frame in which you can get to some solutions, as well as there is a huge budget to experiment and experiment again. I think one of the important things that we try to achieve when we are lucky enough and that to have a good budget or a substantial budget, if you want to put it, is to find solutions to advance the industry, not only the design, but the construction industry. I feel that generally in the work that we as architects or as engineers or as lighting designer are doing, it belongs very much to the past, that we could and we should use technologies, advancement like robotic construction, like molding in a specific way, or using a combination of crafting and technology to find the right solution to advance our way of living, experimenting with spaces and feel safe, comfortable, but not only, having spaces that can light up your brain in other thinking. I think the feeling or the emotions that building design in a proper way, whether it's a social housing or it's a museum with a huge budget, are very much important for our generation. We are constantly bombarded with images in a very small device. In reality, we are now not looking anymore to what is around us as a social space, as a space where we connect, we can really have emotions and discoveries all the time, but we feel like everything is again in a very microscopic object that we all have right now. Now, when we think back about the research that you have to put in place to achieve a certain standard, when technology is not anymore for luxury condominiums or for high-end hotel or for expensive products, but it's something that throughout the research, you made it possible once. It means that it can be done again and again. And those technologies need to evolve, especially in our field. We have done very little compared to what we have done with the real technologies, means communications and videos and facilities like that. We have done very little when it comes to construction. And I think it's the role of an office like us to take advantage of, not of our clients, but to take advantage of the possibilities that are given to us, to try to advance little by little the way we are looking at the construction industries. And I think one of the most important aspects in the office career, and especially when at the beginning of the office, when Zaha and a very small group of people were working in the office, is that although there are, of course, every material has a limit, but concrete was supposed to be something that you can mold, and you can mold using very old techniques that are going back to I mean, I'm Italian, but you had it before. So very old way of constructing, yet inserting, you know, a new way of forming concrete, of you know, making it structural at the same time as being a very strong emotional material, something that you can touch, that you can enjoy the color, that you can work around it. So this kind of experimentation it's very important for every architect or any engineers or anyone that comes into this, it works in this environment. We are late. We are still not able to catch up with a lot of advancement that are happening in other, let's say, disciplines. It takes time, takes a long time. Every building is a unique piece. It's not a car that you can sell millions of times. So it's important that, you know, the technologies, the computer software, as well as all techniques are fused together to be able to build those buildings not only in countries that have the cash to do so, but also in places where there are less resources. Now, I'm going to go through, unfortunately, I have two projects to present, and they are both a very unique project. One is Seven Towers Master Plan in Singapore. And then I'm going to present more in detail the project that I've been working with a huge team, internally and externally, for many, many years. So if you can go on to the next slide, and then we will take any question that you have. I think it's very nice to have a confrontation and discussion and try to exchange ideas with whoever is following this lecture. So what was unique about this project is that despite being a very big site, 220,000 meters square of site, the problem was, and next to the Botanic Garden in Singapore, you go to the next slide, the problem was that if looking at the CAD file of this fantastic site, at the end we were very much constrained. There were two MRT, there are the metro line of the city passing through the site. There was a railway safety zone as well. And moreover, the one that cuts the PUB is what brings water to the entire island state of Singapore from Malaysia. So this thing cutting across was maybe the most important thing to keep in place, and is had a very big offset. So by the time edge road were offsetted and every constraint was taken into pieces, we started to work about the location of the tower. Being a luxury condominium with a fantastic view across the landscape and city center of Singapore, the views were very important. But as they were important the way we could place the towers to optimize the sun and the shadowing from each other. So if you can keep going. So at the time, we started this project in 2007. And at the time, we were really working how to optimize this plan in a way that not only the towers could be looking very different from each other. Repetition is something that, as human beings, we don't like at all. We wanted a residential unit that, despite the repetition of the typology of residents, was still able to bring a differentiation. So we tried many options. Of course, some of those were a little bit extreme. And at the end, we settled on three typologies of towers, 1, 2, 4 petals, 6 petals, and 8 petals. The whole idea was to reconnect to the ground by touching it at the minimum of the volume. So there is a kin at the base of the tower that allows for the minimal touch, at the same time connecting it with the public access in the middle. So the petals in the 4 petals tower, each one is an apartment. In the other can be 1 or 2 per petal. And those are the plans of this kind of array. At the end of the day, the client was asking for the centimeter square of sellable area. If those plans were not getting to the right amount, we were not getting approved it by the client. So we developed at the time a script that was linking the number of floors with the numbers of requested GFA per floor, and then the combination of the smaller apartment at the base and the bigger apartments on the top. In this game, because it was a bit of a game for us, the centimeter square is a tough one to achieve. We then rework it out at the different components of the GFA and the interior layout, keep going, to the point that when at the end we were presenting the final plans, you can see that each balcony is dancing a little bit, is moving from one side to another. The client was finally, after many repetitions, able to sign it off. So what is the technology here? The technology is being able to follow the client throughout his change of minds that happens with every client, get ready. But also big crisis. I mean, we started the project in 2007, then there was the 2008, the market was completely shut for a couple of years. We had to redesign completely. I think it took us only 3 weeks to redesign 2 towers, the massing, the GFA and so on, but only because we had in place a very sophisticated system at the base. Now it's not much sophisticated, but I can tell you that at the time, it took us quite a long time to adjust the script to do what we wanted to do. And the last project that I want to present to you, it's Morpheus, a City of Dreams. Again, huge collaboration between many architects and great designers in the office as well as a great collaboration with the client, with the public authorities, and with all of the different engineering groups that follow us from the beginning to the completion. So this presentation is extremely long, so I will try to maybe stop it at one point without going into too much detail. But the key points that I want to touch base on this is that this project, it looks like designed only to capture, only as an iconic building to capture, you know, customers from the outside. In reality, it's always been designed from the internal and external point of view. So for as much as the facade could look like, you know, some sort of grabbing attentions, in reality, the inside is what makes the experience of visitors a special one. We work with different softwares, and some were extremely elaborated, tweaked only to be sure that it was following the design development of the project. And it is the first high-rise building that is using a steel free-form exoskeleton as the main support for the building itself. Keep going, because there are a lot of points, but maybe I will not be able to go through. So going back to the discussion that we were doing before, when we started this project, none of us, not us, not the client, not the contractors, not even myself that I worked on it from the beginning, was thinking that this building would have been built. This is an image. On the left is a rendering, on the other side is the final construction. And again, we did use a not good rendering company at the time, but the result is even better than a visualization. And for us, this was the biggest achievement. Keep going. So again, a rendering, not of best qualities ever, and the reality, still in construction at the time. And again, yes, and this is the slide that I like best about this project. It's about collaboration. You as an architect will always be working with others, and you will have to be stubborn when it's the time to be stubborn, but you will be also, you need to be able to open up to different opinions, and what is completely logic to you and there are no other answer, you will find people with another logic and with another answer, and it's going to be better than yours. So it's always important to, you know, put those two things on a scale and be open-minded, and at the same time trying to achieve what the vision, the intention since the beginning. So we were very lucky to work with an international group across the world. We were in London and in Hong Kong at the same time, but the rest of the team was all over the globe. It means that Morpheus, that is the name of the project, never slept for 8 years while we were designing it, or constructing it, was always awake. Keep going. The use of parametric design has been at the beginning for us to set which were our parameters, working very closely with the engineering group in the center column. And at the end, with the company that has done the final construction drawings for each one of, in this case, of the doubly curved, non-repeatable cladding for the exoskeleton. And this is the fantastic script that came from it. And it started with something very simple, and every time was implemented with new and new parts. In this array is just a part of what was controlling and adjusting in a way that if there were any friction between the rules for the structure and the rules for the facade, or the rules for the GFA that the client was requiring, an alarm was being set up, and of course another reiteration needed to be tested. So in terms of the people, a building again doesn't belong to the designer, it belongs also to the people that work on this project with a lot of invention, mixing up the typical Chinese craftsmanship, sorry, this word doesn't come to me today, as well as sophisticated robotic machine for cutting panels. But it's always the collaborative effort that makes projects like this to come to reality. I have much more to show you on this project, but I don't know if it's, if Melodie, you can just run for, as a closure, the animation for Morpheus, if you have it in, or maybe not. Melodie, can you? Sorry.
Hi, yeah, I don't think I have it.
Okay, I'm asking to the organizers if we can, if we have more time, and then I will keep going, or we have to close it.
Oh, you can keep going if you want. No problem, sure.
Okay, sure. So only if there are any other questions, because now I cannot read the question at the same time, maybe we can reply at the end.
Yes, yes, it will be good.
Yeah, there's 2 new questions, so I can read them off to you when you like.
Even now, if they're pertinent to what we were showing up.
So there's one which says, you have projects in many different geographies around the world. How do you cooperate with local authorities in the processes of realizing projects? In this context, what is the view of the Zaha Hadid office to the concept of locality?
In the concept of?
Quote unquote locality, or local, I guess.
Locality, yeah. Again, a very difficult question, but it's important to answer to this. First of all, the office works mostly outside Europe. We have a lot of medium and big scale projects, but the majority of our projects are not in London, for sure, and they are all over the world with extremely, now that we are also working in Australia, we have extremely difficult time zones to be able to collaborate and be all awake for meetings. And there is a lot of, I think you have to build up your own way of working with different companies around the world, meaning that sometimes you have to do a presentation at 2 a.m. in the morning on February 9th, freezing yourself while waiting for the connection to start. But most of the time, we do adjust our calendars so that there is a time frame in which maybe it's half of the day where we can effectively meet up on video conferencing. But also we travel a lot. And this is maybe a pertinent question when we look about what has happened in the last 3 months and what will happen in the future. I used to travel to Asia every 4 or 6 weeks. And sometimes I went to Japan only for 1 night. And if I look at it now after COVID and thinking about also the sustainability of all of these, I find it extremely out of context, meaning that for 2 hours meeting in person, you have to fly all the way to Japan from the UK. It feels like it's never needed. But working instead, doing some long period of workshop with the clients or with different parties in person is of course the best way to collaborate, because you can decide, you can wait, you can understand. A lot of you have been experimenting not being able to talk to your peers or to talk with other professionals and having to rely only on things like today to a Zoom conference call. And there are fantastic tools. They allow us to be all in our safe environment for the time being, but they are lengthy. What was done before in between me and my team in 5 minutes now is getting extremely long. The collaboration, and then you always have to think that at some point we have a team on site or relocated. It's a team that is able to be there for maybe 6 months or one year, if not for a longer period, to fulfill the obligation with the client, with the contractor all the time. And for us, you might think that the office is stopping at the schematic design. We follow project all the way to construction, of course with a different responsibility, but there is no stage of work that Zaha Hadid is giving out. Actually, we really want to retain construction documentation as well as being present on site. So when it comes to Morpheus, maybe go back to the second, the previous image. What is important? No, the next one. This I will skip it. When it comes to the first, again, looking at the site constraints as well as the number of rooms that the client wanted to achieve in a very small plot, we started to look at how can we make the maximum number of rooms, but without creating a massive building. And the plot, again, I'll show it in another slide, was 100 meters by 50, and the numbers of rooms in GFA required for the client was almost a full extrusion of the site. So instead of doing twin towers, we started to look at what can we do to deform the internal part of, of the mass to be able to create light coming through the central spaces, but also light for the rooms that is very much needed. So at the end, we ended up at, let's say, the initial stages of the design with this massing. They was looking at both the planes, vertical planes for the majority of the project, as well as how the volume was deformed and respond to the parameters from the client itself, from the client brief. Keep going. So this is, those are a series of images of Morpheus central area, what we call the freeform area. Since the beginning, we wanted an exoskeleton, and again, this project doesn't start from zero. For many, many years, the office was designing around the globe projects that have this idea of combining the structure in steel or in concrete, as you have seen in Miami Tower, with the primary support of the building, with the way the shape was configured and adapted to be able to work with the rules by the structural point of view. So keep going on those images. This is again the central area, one of the bridges, the lower one, and the top one. And again, yes, the building looks quite active on the facade, But not only, the idea was to create this idea of voids also on the top part of the building, when then we have an infinity pool in the center of this courtyard. And what you see here is not a cladding, it's still part of the structure for Morpheus. So when we look at the building itself, the first thing that we did, and no one will notice it, and it's not too helpful when it comes to construction, but it's very helpful when it comes to design, is that Morpheus is a symmetric building, is a mirrored building. So the two facades are mirrored to each other, but are completely identical. Keep going. And again, this is the central void of the building that is mirrored on the other side. Keep going. And this is showing the two facades of the building. So when it comes to the design, I was telling you before that we work as much on the interiors, what you see as a guest of this hotel, as a person that goes to visit this hotel, to what you see from the outside. So the internal and external facade that is cladded with the exoscanner, but also what is happening from the inside. And this project goes from every, I'm sorry, this is a problem with goes from every scale. So as a podium that is completely integrated, the majority of the floors are hotel with some public facilities in the two bridges. And then the sky top where the swimming pool and the villas are located. So the building in itself is less than 150,000 square meters with a very narrow footprint. Keep going. So starting from the experience of arrival to the building, we really didn't want to have a podium and then a tower. The rest of the compound that was built when we started designing Morpheus was exactly this, podium and then smaller towers on the top. We wanted something that was all connected. So from the porte cochere as you enter the building, all the way, keep going, all the way to so again, an image of the built porte cochere of Morpheus, where the structure is very present, all the way to the interior facade of the very tall atrium. You're looking at 50 meters high atrium as you enter the building itself. So this is, of course, a sectional representation of the project while we were designing it. And now we can discover, if you keep going, we can discover how it works in reality. So the building here shows a bit of, in the previous image, shows a bit of what we call an overall design, where the interior and exterior facades and the small scale of Pierre Hermé, that is a patisserie from France, pavilion is located to the work on the atrium, the internal facade and the external exoskeleton. So you can see that there is a recognizable pattern. Is everything as a triangulation as it was, but each one of those triangulation, it responds to parameters, whether structure, whether for water tightness, or in terms of the interior facade. In some of those spaces, there are areas like that. There are actually in the atrium, there are two areas, floors that are all mechanical equipment. So the more dense the grid of the triangulation, the more was hiding what was happening at the back. And then this idea of a pavilion that somehow, again, has a curvilinear facade, but it's very much responding to this idea of luxury and small attention to the detail. Keep going. And here it is, looking up. So this is the atrium walls with the first belly of the facade. Those are some examples of the zoom in. And we designed this space from the flooring to the lift cars that are designed by us, to every single detail, inclusive of the door handle that the client asked us to change 5 times before deciding on the biggest one ever. And again, I like the way that every scale, whether it's the marble on the real marble on the back with this lighting intrusion, as well as the reflectivity of the Pierre Hermé pavilion that creates some sort of private space in the middle, are very much working together. Two objects like this started as we needed some sprinklers in this big atrium, and we started looking at it and not how to mask it, but how to make it much bigger. So sorry, just a second. Sorry, just a second.
I think I can answer. There was one more question in the chat, and maybe I take this opportunity to answer Eda's question. As a global company, what problems did you encounter during the pandemic period? What effects do you think this period will have on your projects and working system in the future? From what I understand, I think what we experienced as the 400 plus colleagues and myself was quite representative of what a lot of other practices experienced as well. There was a kind of period of a couple of weeks of technical difficulties, let's say, while we transitioned to working from home much quicker than we expected to. But I think all of the teams managed to do this in a way that was much smoother than we expected. And we've also been able to be much more agile in having international collaboration with our consultants, with our clients. We can jump on calls around the world, across continents from 1 minute to the next. As Viviana was saying, Viviana, I'm just answering the next question. As she was saying before, I think the kind of adoption of these digital tools to communicate has been, it's been really harnessed to a really productive extent across a lot of different practices in the industry. But at the same time, what we're anticipating is that there's still nothing that can replace the physical interaction of being able to understand a site and the context, even things like the climate or the density or the culture, those kinds of things, as well as the camaraderie between a team and the kind of body language that can be responded to in the long run. We have to see how we balance that out. At the moment, we work really well because so many of us have been working together for many years. And so what we're trying to figure out now is how to find the right balance moving forward. I think that the pandemic in general will, I mean, we've already seen every few weeks the kind of guidelines changing. So people who were starting companies to print stickers for 2 meter distancing, now it's 1 meter distancing. But on a bigger scale, I think the cities are rethinking about their public transport. It comes down to really rethinking how we circulate, how we behave as well in cities, how we approach the design of flexible spaces. So buildings, it's really important that they are flexible enough to be adaptable over the long term, because the lifespan of a building is now to the extent where we couldn't even necessarily imagine how we're going to inhabit it in 50 plus years. So designing it to be responsible to how the building can be adapted, or so that it doesn't become a kind of unusable space 50 years down the road, is also something that's related to its carbon footprint. And these are all things that we have to think much longer and much wider from the very early stages.
And apologies again, a little bit of the noise in the background. And I think what Melodie said is very important. We were having just a couple of weeks ago a conference call with the Dean of the Architectural Association, and she was rightly saying that, I mean, we should never call it social distancing. We should call it physical distancing, and the difference is huge. As human beings, we need the sociality of being in a community, whether small or big, doesn't matter whether you live in a village or you live in a big city like London. The important thing is that you have your daily social contact with other people, whether because you work with them or because you meet in the park or in the main square of the city. Now, the situation right now, it is really against this, but at the same time made us reflect a bit on how we were doing before in terms of, you know, our sociality and how much we have been craving, sorry, for being together again in open spaces, even better. So the important thing is that there will be, of course, a way out by this situation. We have shown as a community around the globe a lot of flexibility in adapting, and this is very important, but we should never give up on our social context. So better go back and call it physical distancing more than social distancing. We are part of the animal world that likes sociality and like being together. And this has been tough on every generations. I mean, from kids to adults to professionals to all people especially. So going back to Morpheus, so this was the totem that we built around all of the mechanical fire detections or fire elements of the building. Unfortunately, some of the images are wrong, like the next one. So but let's show it. So how can you optimize the room numbers that have, of course, a distance from the core? So you have the core, then the corridor, and then the rooms. Up to a certain length of the rooms, you are not allowed anymore. You don't give to the room the right proportions. So the cores were placed at the center, but not in the middle of the building. And each one of them was running and servicing a number of floors. The huge repetition in terms of room sizes was very appreciated by the client. They want the maximum repetition. But it was also becoming for us the central piece of entertainment of the hotel itself. So if you keep going to the next slide, I hope we don't have. So at the back of the entrance, there are the panoramic lift. They are running through the entire building. So it's like from the atrium, that is the only space that is fully air conditioned. All of the lifts are passing through each one of the bridges and each one of the floors to then arrive to the top of the building where the swimming pool is located. So this is what the previous images, what you see, all of those images is what you see from the panoramic lift as you move up into the building. And this is again how we work very intensively with the client. So we wanted a lot more bridges or a lot more spaces in between. And of course, all of this had a cost in terms of structure, in terms of what was possible to build, and in terms of efficiency of the hotel floor plate as well. But at the end of the day, by a round of optimization, we got up to the final solution, keep going, where we have the podium that is all connected. And then the typical floor, sorry, if you go back to the previous one. So the typical floor is the two set of lifts core, the panoramic and the service lift at the back, and an array of rooms where the special ones are, of course, the one in the corner. And then this is the bridge, the first bridge, in which we design some special pavilions, because the lifts are passing through and everyone can see the space from outside. And as you know, in terms of the way, the etiquette for Chinese restaurant, you need to be in enclosed spaces. We started to look at creating those quite open bubbles, but they were screening people sitting in the inside. And of course, those bridges are the two sides of the structure from the right and left core of the building. Good. So this is the final design, again, a different type of totem, a special bar, and those pavilions, they are an array of differently oriented leaves. Keep going, they are going from one part to another. So on the side, they are lower, but they are more dense in terms of the orientation. This is the mezzanine, that is a art gallery. So it's connected via a staircase to the floor below where the restaurant is. And this is the special space. So this below, you can see the last void. On top of you, there is the soffit that is covering then the swimming pool. And there are 3 floors of complete rooms around, again, as the ground floor, around the perimeter of the building. And as you keep going up, those are other views of the space. So there is again natural light during the day. And then there is the level of the swimming pool that been designed many times. And on top of this, the pool villas. So there are very luxurious space with their own internal swimming pool. Again, the exoskeleton is wrapping up and down this building, is connected again to the core when it comes to the swimming pool or the two bridges. Keep going. And this is the final build project. Now, in terms of how we did design this building, I can go on for hours. Maybe I'll explain how we designed it, what was the collaboration with the structural engineers, what we did and what they did, and how at the end the rules were a constant test and trying in between us, them, and at the end the contractor. So keep going, Melodie. So again, you have seen this, and oh, that's really a problem because you don't see the text. But you can see the three images before. So the concept design was this extremely fluid and free form, and the exoskeleton itself was quite rough. During schematic design, in a way of optimizing more and more this and making more flat the surfaces, we went too far from the initial concept. So at the end, we turn it again as a soft transition between the flat facade of the building and the free form space in the center of the building. So, but how do we did this? Is again throughout a series of steps. Keep going. First of all, it's important to understand which are the elements that the building itself is composed. So the exoskeleton, that is a still singly curved members frame, is connected back through the slab to the core to create this lateral stability of the building. And then of course there is the glazing itself. In some areas, like the central part of the building, again the freeform area, most of the exoskeleton is self-standing and connected back to the rest of the rigid system done by the core and the flat exoskeleton. Keep going. Keep going, because unfortunately this is a little bit too... So this was again during construction. The singly curved facade, it's quite easy to understand how it was fabricated. It's a single, it's a surface that is deformed only in one direction. And there was quite a number of repetition of nodes and corners. But when it comes to the next step, that is already when we have the transition from the flat facade into the curved one, there are rooms still in the corner on the right. So we needed to be able to have a faceted facade with a maximum number of repetitions, and at the same time being able to cover it with double glazing. Whereas the central part of the building, the decision was also from an environmental point of view to only work on the air conditioning where we have the restaurants, and the rest of the atrium that is self-shaded by the rest of the building. There is no air conditioning, no heating. Of course, in Macau, you don't need much. Keep going. Unfortunately, there is a problem with this, but we can. So I think this is part of the work that we constantly done with the engineers. So how we can optimize the structure. First of all, if you start from the top in the middle drawing, you will see that the smallest members are located on the top. And then if you follow the section, as you get to the base, the steel members, once they are completely loaded, they are 1 meter by 1 meter. So we were working then with this array of colors and member sizes to make sure that we were really optimizing the design and the structure at the same time. Keep going. So the first thing was to move from a very free-form model to something that was following the topology of the glass, but retaining only the important information about the initial steps. And this was extremely important when it came to the work that we did on the free-form area. Keep going. So again, is not each one of the members connecting one node to another needed to be a straight envelope, so it needed to be planar. So what we did, and this was a great collaboration between our teams, if you keep going to the next one, between our teams and then later on the contractor, how to work out something that is always planar. So from defining the mean direction, then extruding, this is all coming one, extruding the plane, then create the envelope for each one, of course, coding them, but create then as an envelope. This red surface was the final cladding surface, but what was given to the structural engineers. This image shows the work done by Bureau Apple in creating the members. So everything needed to be inside the red surfaces. So they worked out each one of the nodes. We had to adjust the red surfaces, not once, but 10 or 15 times. And at the end, the optimization between what was the best from a structural point of view and what was reflecting our original design was completed. If you keep going with the images, so this is the input came from us from Rhino and Grasshopper, went into a series of sophisticated structural analysis. There is no code for this such of structure, so the authorities were asking for additional analysis to be done, and all the way to the TECLA for the final construction of the building. So if we now have a look at what was the building without cladding, we would have loved to have a building without cladding, but of course for the client it would look a little bit too industrial. But here with human being while building it, you can see how they have, which is the scale of those members. Some of those elements are quite huge and were all fabricated by a ship fabricator. So, you know, that the big skull of not sailing boats, really cargo boats. There is a factory near Macau in Shenzhen, and they have worked out the geometry for the steel. So although the geometry were not easy, were all planar, so they can all be cut from different sheets and folded to follow the curvature that was required for the members. There was a single curvature. Keep going again. This is the top void with someone working, an image showing how people and the nodes relate on the structure. And all of the construction sequence was analyzed more than once. When it came to the fabrication of the cladding, that was a really step up for us, because the reality is that we wanted a spot-on product, and at the same time, we didn't want to use any American, European fabricators, because it would have cost a fortune. So we worked very closely. We went to factory, from London to the factory many times to check with the client the quality of the product. And at the end, if you keep going, was a fantastic combination of digital tools. So what you can see in pink is exactly what we had designed in Rhino. Then it was translated and cut to shape. And if you keep going, many mock-ups of the building were done to understand how they were working out. And this was approved with comments. Of course, we always have comments till the last day. And if we're going on, this slide explains the process from the beginning. So one is taking our 3D model one-to-one, build a grid, then cut with a computerized machine, single axis, double axis machine, and then by hand giving the first curvature to the panel itself, fixing it on the base, preparing number 2, and then again recutting the edge to follow our 3D model, measuring number 7 to the precision we gave was 2 millimeters precision, then preparing the subframe, bending the stubs, and one by one fixing each one of the bolts and to then assembling at the end. So now you can see the sequence a little bit more quickly from if Melodie, you want to go through the different steps. This is the base, this is the first cutting, the first curvature given to the panel. Then the panel was attached to the base and put in form, put again in the cutting machine to take out all of the edges. They had to check that each one of the dimensions were right. This is the bending of the stiffing at the back of the panel, and each one of the different, let's say, bolts and so on were already marked, so the workers knew exactly which kind of bolt or which kind of elements to attach to what. Keep going. And then again, the panel was finished, was pre-assembled to make sure that the precision was exactly what was required, and then taken out again, dismantled, and put it in, those are different images, put it in a machine that was giving the final painting, wrapped it up, ready for delivery, to then a bit of a summary. So this is where I want to maybe spend a 2 seconds more. We didn't know at the beginning how, not us, not the engineers, nor the contractor. And we tested different things. We were suggesting things, the workers were suggesting something else, and then the facade contractor was saying something yet different. And the final solution has come by this high-end technology that we have put in place while designing the building, everything figured out, to the point that even an unskilled worker could put together panels and different parts without making any mistakes, to the precision of less than 2 millimeters. So it's craft and its intelligence, is the innovation in construction that we really want to do, not by starting from zero, not by using the most complex technology ever, but giving the chance by optimization of the system to get something built exactly to the quality that we wanted, the client wanted, and we're all done in China without any Swiss contractor coming into the game that we tried by the end, and they said it was impossible to be built. Keep going. So at the end, the panels were transported on site and attached, each one in the right position. There was a lot of intelligence in how to make sure that each panel was going exactly in the same location. Keep going. And the right location. And this is a very nice image. I love it because it shows all of the work that needed to be made in order to install then the glazing and final cladding. And I think we can stop it here, Melodie, or then there is many other chapters of this presentation, but I think it's important to get an overall understanding how we work, we collaborate, and we very much enjoy to work with the fabricators as well.
Many thanks for your presentation.
You're welcome. I will already have questions. Maybe there are already some I need to open.
Okay.
Viviana, it was very informative, very amazing and impressive solutions. I think you are all pushing the boundaries of construction techniques and engineering. So you are obviously one of the best and largest architectural firms in the world. So we are very much impressed.
In this regards, I must say I very like the presentation with Melodie, with whom I'm also teaching at the Architectural Association. But what is nice is that both of us will be working on architectural master planning projects, but also on furniture design or very small objects. And I really like to remember Zaha saying that scale doesn't matter. It's, I mean, every single thing that you design, you have to put the same intensity, the same love, the same intelligence as you were building a skyscraper. The only thing that is fantastic about furniture or object is that the time frame to get it built is a little bit smaller compared to the one that it takes to build a building. And for as much as I've been extremely lucky because I was on project that came real project, not only on paper. But I can tell you, I spent, I don't know, 5 years on one project that didn't go anywhere, and another 3 years on another that didn't go anywhere. And even the product designs that I've done, more furniture design that I've done, they took a minimum of 2 years. So our profession is full of a lot of frustration when it comes to, you know, working and working, really fine, and really being engaged in the process, and then maybe a global crisis arrives, or a planning permission that is not granted, or whatever is happening, and you feel like, oh my God, I've lost 3 years on this with nothing done. In reality, nothing gets lost, especially in our office. We have a very high level of communication between teams and project and people, and project, they find their way. They are different from the one before. There is no repetition in Zaha Hadid architect projects, but you can see a line. And this is a line of us trying to, you know, implement ideas, making better and better every time we retry.
It was also a surprise for me. I didn't know that you are very much in the product design. I was thinking it's more like project, but Melodie's presentation was also very impressive. I didn't know that, so I learned a lot. By the way, I have one small question. As we were talking about products, maybe Melodie can give an answer to that. How important is EPD for your specification when you are specifying a product in your maybe interior or exterior? This environmental product declaration.
I think it's really project specific. I mean, because, or maybe I would actually let Viviana answer this, because for the product design, for the smaller scale projects, up until the moment, it's inevitably, I think it's more the recyclability of it, the sourcing of it, the strategic kind of efficient use in the fabrication, that it's in terms of not having too much waste, in terms of utilizing the best methods of manufacture. But where there's really the impact, I think, is in the architectural scale.
Yeah, I think you touch one of the important things. I mean, the reason why, for example, the project in Aramco in Saudi Arabia received the first LEED award in all Saudi is that most of the material used for the construction of the building were locally sourced. So there are, thanks God, there are really important regulations that are coming into place, different from country to country, but they are forcing us as architects and designers, as a building contractor, to always think what is better for the environment. When it comes to us and sourcing the materials, it's again a big combination of factors, of course, proximity and transportability. Of course, there is something to do with the quality of the raw material in itself to the final product, how they combine and get assembled together. I personally find extremely difficult selection of colors. Maybe I come from a generation that everything was black and white, not even gray. And in terms of, you know, really selecting colors, me and my team, we go, I mean, we really have to ask a lot of samples, analyze them, putting outside, inside, and look at the properties and look at the feeling and look at the intensity. And again, you always have doubts, and then you go back and you source it again and again. And I think this is, from one end, you can think it's a weakness of us not having problems with colors, but at the end, it's also true that, you know, colors is giving an emotional surface to the people experience. But it also has to be true to the material that you use as a base. So for us, more than using color as an impact on something, we wanted to follow the shape and follow the architectural intent or the product. For example, the fantastic table that Melodie has presented, it is vortex. There is only, I think, in 3 colors, actually 2 colors, and each in the transparent one and a blue one. And what I love about that is that the blue one is not as a chance. I mean, it was again a way of exploring the form of a vortex of water with, you know, giving it yet another layer. But it's a layer that should never take over the architectural intent. So colors for us are important. They are the appearance, but they need to help understanding the overall geometry, the overall intention, the overall emotional connection with the space you are navigating through.
Okay. Berna, are there any questions?
No, we just, they answered all. Let me check again, but I think not. There are lots, thank you for the presentation, fantastic. Our guests like the presentation very much, thank you for you.
Pleasure, thank you for having us.
Thank you very much for this afternoon. If you have any other questions, please feel free to pass it and reply.
Okay.
Okay. Enjoy your weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you. You too.
Bye. Bye.
Stay safe. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.